How are you guys? How are you doing today? So, I want to address a couple of things. People buy a fish at Petco, PetSmart, wherever. They go to Reddit to ask questions, right? But what to do, how to set up a tank, and whatnot. And they get bombarded with a bunch of answers about, I was laughing because this lady went, pays $20 for a Betta, and she goes to Reddit, and then this guy goes like, so you need to buy a heater, buy a filter, minimum 10-gallon tank, buy this conditioner, then dechlorinator, and it's like, man, this lady just bought a $20 better, and you're just telling her to spend $100 in the first day for all these things, right? Oh, you need to cycle the tank like 2 weeks before you add any fish to it. It's a simple beta, right? Let me show you guys something. This is the number one killer of betta fish filters. Let me explain why. People rely on these filters and they don't know what they're doing. They kill their betta and then they ask, but if I had a filter, why is the water bad? And then when you look on the back, the filter is overflowing because they never replace it. Why do they never replace it? Because somebody smart said to them, oh, you're not supposed to clean the filter, because if you do clean the filter, then you're gonna kill all the beneficial bacteria that was building up in there. So the person never cleans the filter. And then the filter is all clogged up with gunk and dead matter and bacteria and whatnot. And then it's overflowing in the back, obviously. It's overflowing in the back. And then it's not doing anything anymore. It's not cleaning the water anymore. The person doesn't have any plants in there. And the fish eventually dies 3 days later. See, so that's why I don't like using filters when somebody has small tank. This is 3 gallons, for example, right? Somebody has a small tank, 3, 5 gallons, 10 gallons, one betta fish, and a few decoration. What do you even bother with a filter? You don't need a filter. You need a heater. That's important. Because if the temperature drops around the house, you turn the air conditioner on, that water is gonna get super cold. It's gonna stress the betta, it'll die. But you have one betta in a 3, 5, 10-gallon tank, you feed him that betta 4 or 5 brine shrimp a day, what would you even bother with a filter? Just do water changes. Now, when do I recommend somebody use a filter, even in those conditions? When you have a tank like this, in a place like that, very dark. I just moved these lights so you could see better. But the way that was, if I was to turn the lights off in the garage, that tank would be too dark. If it's too dark and it's not receiving sunlight, the water will become stagnant. Therefore, bacteria, pathogen, parasites will start to grow in there real quick and they'll kill you better. That's why I don't have any bettas in here. That tank, I'll never use it. Because it's also a tank that unfortunately, it wasn't built properly. It has the pump on the back, and if you ever turn it off, all the dead stuff and the grime, everything that's bad attached to the filter, like so, it'll seep back into the clean area of the tank. So it's a system that I dislike very much. And I had 2 fish dying there, and I figured out that it was just the tank, the way the pump works. You could never turn it off, and it's always in the water, so it's always, it's not removing anything. It's just circulating it, but it's always in the water. Anyways, that's a stupid system. I don't like it. But again, another reason why I don't do that, right? So that's the thing. You don't need a filter. Okay, if you have a tank like this, upstairs, living room, somewhere where you have natural light coming in through a window, even if it's not hitting the tank directly, but if you have some natural light coming through a window, right? Or if you have a little bit of sunlight that hits the tank a couple hours throughout the day, just partially hits the tank a couple hours throughout the day, then you don't need a filter because the sunlight is extremely good. As you probably know, everybody should know, sunlight is everything in this planet, right? For plants, for animals, for us human beings, sunlight is key. If you have a tank anywhere where you get a little bit of natural light coming throughout the room, that water will not become stagnant right away. It'll take a long time. But of course, you need to do water changes, right? You need to do water changes. If you do water changes, then it's fine. Add a couple of floating plants, and then you'll be good. You don't even need a filter. Now, I'm not saying, again, when do you want to use a filter? You have a tank in a dark area, then use a filter so it creates aeration in the water. It creates movement. By creating movement in the water, like I'm doing here with this brine shrimp, by creating movement in the water doesn't become stagnant. It oxygenates the water. Plants do better. And of course, you need to add a light. But you still need to do the water changes, and that's the key. People use a filter and they forget about water changes, so they don't do it often, right? You cannot do 30% water change every 3 weeks on 3 gallons of water, unless it's completely fully planted, because the plants are doing most of the work, right? So that's my thing. Personally, I prefer anybody with one betta fish. I'm talking about betta fish only. You have one betta fish in a tank, being 3, 5, 10 gallons, hell, 20, 30. The more water you have, the less water change you need to do. That's what it's all about. Don't even bother with a filter. Just use a heater, but don't bother with a filter, right? Another thing I wanted to address was people say, oh, you need to cycle your tank before you add that betta. Why would you get a betta? You need to cycle the tank like 2 weeks before you add a betta. You don't need to cycle anything if all you have, again, is one betta that you're adding to a small tank. 2 gallons, 3, 5 gallons, 10 gallons. What are you gonna cycle that for? You don't have anything else in there. You're not gonna be adding anything else. You don't have plants in there. I get that what those people are saying is not wrong either. You do it and it's great. But you cycle a tank for a couple of weeks or even more when you have plants. You're adding a bunch of plants coming from different places. Those plants are bringing with them all sort of bacteria. You put them in there, you put snails, then you put a fish. Of course you need to cycle the tank because you're adding different things from different places. So that will mess up the water chemistry, and therefore you want the water to be stable when you start adding fish. So it makes sense to, you have substrate and dirt, all that stuff, right? So of course it makes sense to cycle a tank like that, and everybody should do it before you start adding fish. But not when you have a single tank, with no plants. You just have some substrate and decoration, maybe a plastic plant in there. You don't need to cycle anything. What you need is to have good water when you're gonna add that fish in there. And I already made a video about that. By good water, I mean rested water, at least 24 hours. Add almond leaves. Bettas love almond leaves. The color, the tannins that is released, it creates a darker, like a darker color in the water. Bettas love that. Almond leaves have they have beneficial, like, medicinal properties, right? And they help to combat bacteria and parasite and fungus and inflammation. So that's extremely good for bettas. And then you could always have like a 5-gallon bucket with water already available, sitting down for 2-3 days at a time, so you can do water changes, right? And that way you always have that water available to do water changes. That's what's important. Before the filter, before cycling, what you need to have is water. And I'm gonna prove it to you. So let me show you real quick. I always do complete water changes. And why? Look, I always have water sitting outside. Always have water sitting outside. And the key, sunlight. Sunlight and almond leaves, right? When I do a water change on my 5-gallon buckets where I have my Bettas, like these ones, look, I just did these ones yesterday. See how it's so clear compared to the other ones that I need to do water change? On like this one, see this one, I did that one yesterday. I did a complete 100% water change. Imagine that I need to cycle water every time I'm gonna do a water change because I'm adding a complete water change, right? Like this one, look, I did this ones yesterday. You see? And look how happy he is. Look at this fella, creating a bubble nest and everything. Look at it. See? But I have water, see, no filter, no heater. Obviously this is a greenhouse, you know, it stays warm, but no filter, no heater. This water doesn't become stagnant by sitting here in a bucket without movement for 3 days. You know why? Because I use sunlight. It hits the water, and that's healthy for the fish. It's good for the water quality. Now, if you were to leave this here, obviously, for a long time, like 4 weeks, a month, see, like look at this fella here, right? You see all these little bubbles in the water? Now, that's not necessarily bad. It's just algae, right? The algae oxygenates the water during the day when it's super sunny, right? Some tanks will have more algae than others, which is fine. I do that intentional. I said it in another video because I use that water to put it in the containers where I keep the green water for my Daphnia, right? So I let it build up like that, and then I replace it with fresh water, and I use the green one again for the Daphnia, right? That's what I do here, like that everywhere, right? So, and then look, I got fish here, baby fish. Look at it. See? Fries. I got some fries. They're probably about 100 in there, 150. No heater, no filter. They're fine in there. I got more fries over here. No heater, no filter. Couple snails. Right? Why? Because it's sunlight. I'm dealing with sunlight. I'm using the sunlight to keep the water in good shape. Again, you have your tank, 5 gallons, 3 gallons, whatever, right? You have a tank like that in the dark. You barely put the lights on. Then yeah, use a filter. Keep that water moving so it doesn't become stagnant, and then parasites and bad bacteria and pathogens don't start growing in there and then eventually kill your fish. But if you had a tank outside with sunlight, or you allow sunlight to pass through a window and just heat that tank a few hours a day, like some people have done that and their tanks look beautiful and great water, then it'll be fine, you know. So I just wanted to address those couple myths. You don't need a filter necessarily if you're dealing with Bettas only. Remember also, I think I forgot to mention this, I have cichlids in my game room upstairs. There's about 25 of them in a 55 gallon. I need a big, strong filter moving that water constantly, creating oxygen and cleaning, because they eat and poop a lot and they need that oxygen to keep breathing. Bettas, on the other hand, they breathe outside the water. They come up to the surface and they breathe just fine. So they don't need a filter to create movement in the water to oxygenate the water, right? So that's another reason why you don't really, you know, it doesn't even matter. You don't need a filter for Bettas, right? That's the thing. So again, I'm not saying that you don't ever need a filter. There's conditions where you do, right? But in this case, you have one Betta, you're coming home, just have water available. Ready water, 24 hours rested water, add almond leaf. It's very beneficial for the fish. Put the water in the sun. Right, sun is coming up right now. Let me show you something. Because this I used a lot of it yesterday. And I only have one tank. I have two more coming in now this weekend. But I already took the cover off because I'm waiting. Since I put this fresh water here last night, I'm waiting for that sun to come up and start hitting that water. It's gonna dechlorinate the water and it's gonna make it real good for the fish. And by tonight, I'll be able to use that water. Plus, I'm gonna add a couple of almond leaves in there. That's all you gotta do. Okay, I just wanted to throw that out there because I'm tired of every time somebody goes on Reddit and asks a question, they get people like, oh my God, cycle the tank for 2 weeks. Oh, you need to buy dechlorinator. You need to buy conditioner. You need to buy a filter. You need to buy whatever else, you know. Like, man, I don't use any of that stuff. I never use chemicals in the water, never. All I do is rested water, almond leaves, and a pinch of salt. Forgot that. Pinch of salt every 5 gallons. That salt is just to keep bacteria in check. You know what I mean? Just so nothing gets out of control. It changes the chemistry of the water. It's very, very beneficial too for the bettas. Pinch of salt every 5 gallons of water. That's it. And it stays there. You don't have, but that's only when you have bettas. That's it. Nothing else. No plants or nothing. You know, you just have some decoration. That's it. Right? So hopefully this video helped you. Yeah, you know, if you have any questions, leave it in the comments below. Subscribe to the channel, help me out a little bit. And again, any questions? I don't know a whole lot. I don't know everything there is to know, you know. But if I can help you somehow with what I know, I'll definitely try. So take care.